Hi, I'm Shannon Simmons, and I've recently had the opportunity to listen to Bill Daggett talk to us about how schools can get their students college and career ready. I'm going to show you a presentation that I put together based on the information that I learned while listening to Mr. Daggett. How can we get our students college and career ready when we're talking about an elementary school? Here at Griggs Road, we have students who are starting in pre-K to fifth grade. And many times we focus on what we need to be doing to get our students ready for the next grade level. Kindergarten students ready for first grade, fifth grade students ready for middle school, but we never really concentrate on what happens to those students once they leave our classrooms and they do go on to the next grade level, or more importantly, what happens to those students when they leave our elementary school and they go to middle school, what happens when those students go to high school, and what happens to those students once they get to college. Bill Daggett talked a lot about the fact that many of the students that are going to college and are graduating from college are unable to find jobs. Think about that. How many of our friends, or maybe even you, have children who went to college and are now living back at home and are not even working in jobs that maybe they went to college for, or do not have jobs at all? What we need to do is start to create a culture of change. This isn't talking about our achievement scores, how well our students are doing on tests, but how well are we preparing our students for the life that they will have beyond the four walls of our classroom? How are we preparing them for the real world? When we went to college, our standards were different. The things that were taught in the classroom, we're teaching them at a faster rate now, and most of it is because it's been mandated by the government on what we need to teach, and we have these strict guidelines of what needs to happen. But how can we take what we have to do and also make sure that we're getting our students ready for the real world? What I want to talk about is how, as educators, how can we work to identify the problem? What can we do together to look at what is happening to our students, and what can we do as elementary teachers in building that foundation, talking about what they're going to be when they grow up? How can we help them to be the most successful? And that starts with us looking at what's happening to students when they graduate from college. Looking back at the data, looking back at and tracking the students from the Clover School District, from the South Carolina. Overall, we always hear that in South Carolina, our graduation rate is low, but yet our school systems seem to meet the high achievement. So why is that happening? How can we create a culture that looks at not just looking at student achievement, but looking at how well-rounded our children are? And are they on target where they need to be, not in contact with what state standards say, but with what the workforce says? Bill Daggett pointed out several times in his presentation that students are meeting the levels of achievement because our threshold is lowering. So it looks like our students are achieving more at a faster rate. However, it's not in line with what the workforce is looking at. He had a quote that from Condoleezza Rice that said 70% of our students are not even ready for the military because they have to have a high school diploma now. They rarely take a GED. They have to be able to pass a military exam that requires them to be able to do some of those application skills that our students are not ready for. These were something that years ago, everyone took for granted, that if you went to college, you could go, or you could get a job out in the workforce. If you could get into the military, and that's not happening for our students today. So we need to change the way that we look at things and change our culture. And this is not just, oh, this teacher's bad, it's this teacher's problem. This is an overall problem with education as a whole. We need to look at, what does a South Carolina graduate look like? I don't know how many of you even know, but South Carolina actually has a profile, if you go to the state report card, that shows exactly what a South Carolina graduate should look like. I think that's probably focused on more in the high school, but we never talk about it here in the elementary schools. And that's something that we need to change. We need to start to look at what is our end goal, not for the school year, but what is our end goal for students over their lifetime, over their educational lifetime. What percentage of students are graduating in the Clover School District are graduating from high school? What percentage of students are going to go to a 4-year college? How many of them are going to go to a 2-year college? What percentage of those students going to the 4-year college are graduating from college? How many of them are able to find a job? How many of them are back home living with their parents? How many students that went to a 2-year college? How many of them graduated? How many of them have a degree and are using that degree? And then to look at the overall, you're going to find a lot of that information based on the state of South Carolina. But then if we can even narrow that down to the rate for the Clover School District students, the students that we service, how many of our students are going on to a 4-year college, a 2-year college? How many of them are able to find a job upon completion of their education? Or how many of them are unable to find a job, so they just continue on with their education? How many students do we have in graduate programs who have never actually entered the workforce? Once we've identified the problem, we need to start to look, and we can use lots of different information to help us be able to look at, once we as educators have identified the problem, then we need to start to talk to our community members. And that looks at our parents, working together with the parents. What do they think the problems are? Because, you know, as teachers, we're mandated and we know certain things that not necessarily we involve the parents in, or parents are a part of in the decision making. How do they think that we are preparing their child? How are we preparing their child for the workforce? What do they see? Because many of the parents are not teachers. They are actual people that are out in the workforce that's different than education, and they can offer us some information about what they see that our students are unable to do, or what our students are able to do that are necessary for the job set or the skills that they need once they graduate from college. And then we'll start to look at, what are some of the strengths that we have as a school district? What are we doing that's right? And what are some of the weaknesses that we have? What are some of the things that we need to change? And then start that conversation of, well, how are we going to change? How can we change what we are doing in order to get our students in the Clover School District ready for jobs? We must look at the research. When we're looking at this, actually Bill Daggett talked about the NAEP and looking at your state's ranking. How do we rank in comparison to other schools, districts, our state, in comparison to the other 49 states? There are school districts who are not necessarily, who are considered to be the top 25 school districts or schools, and they're not necessarily the most high achieving schools. And they've talked about, Bill Daggett worked along with Bill and Melinda Gates to look at what are these model schools doing? How have they changed, or what have they done to change? Not looking at student achievement, but making sure that their students are college and career ready. And it starts with some of the things that, you know, we have to do a needs assessment. What are the needs of our students? Every school is going to be different. Every school district is going to be different, and every state is going to be different. But we need to focus in right here at Griggs Road. What are the needs of our students, and what can we do to help make the change? And we need to look at these model schools and do some research and see, what are they doing that we're not doing? What are they doing that's different? One major thing that Bill Daggett talked about was report cards. And I know that we send, in our district, we send report cards home every 9 weeks, progress reports every 4.5 weeks. And we literally just give grades. You know, it'll look across and it'll say, you know, ELA, A, math, B, you know, whatever the student's grades is, but it doesn't really tell us where the students are achieving. Meaning, what is their reading level? You know, we use Fontes and Pinnell, but we only report that twice a year. We use MAP testing, but we only do that twice a year. What if we had rubrics and we reported on students, give a picture of what the student actually looked like every 10 weeks? And that's some things that the model schools are doing that I know that we are not doing in our district. And it's kind of changing the outlook, the plan, the end result, not just thinking, my job is to make sure that they're ready for 6th grade. It's changing the entire vision that we have. It's all of our jobs together to make sure that they're ready once they enter college and are able to graduate from college. And being in the elementary schools, we are that foundation. Then it says, so what does this mean for our school? You know, if we were to look at our state report card today, we know that our school is considered to be an A school. We have a good and excellent rating. If we look at those achievement scores, if we look at our state testing, which last year was the first year that we started with college and career testing, which is called SC Ready, College and Career. Looking at those scores, we've scored high. We've done fairly well. However, that does not mean that our students are still completing college and finding jobs. So what is it that we need to do to make that change? We also know that there were areas of improvement. As far as writing, we've tried to change this year a little bit how we teach writing to our students, that it wasn't preparing them for life. Very rarely in life does someone ask you, well, what's your opinion, or what did you do on your summer break, and to write about it or make a story about it. We're now using more of that text data analysis, going back what you've read, use the evidence from the text. That's what's going to be required when the students are in college and when they're in real life. Just like many of us when we're taking our college classes, or we're having to write something up for the district office or write reports, we have to use the data analysis. No one's just asking our opinion. What can we do to make sure that our achievement levels are rising and that the threshold isn't just going down? Because that is what is failing our students. We're going to see that the levels of achievement are going up, but the thresholds are going down, showing that our students are actually becoming what we would consider smarter, but that's not accurate because it's not in line with what the workforce is looking for. And so what I want you to see here is this resource, and I did put the YouTube video of Bill Daggett, because I really think that this is something that changed my opinion about what we're doing as schools. When I first thought about this, I thought, well, we're doing everything right. Look, we have great test scores. We're using technology. Our students we're the highest school district in the state. But something as an elementary teacher I know that we don't know is what's happening after they leave our school. What is happening to those students who were maybe our A student, and we know that they got a 4-year ride to Clemson University or South Carolina Gamecocks, but do we know what happened to that student once they graduated from college? Were they able to find a job? And if they weren't, how many of them are back home? Because as educators, it's our job to make sure, starting at the elementary level, that these students are making the achievement levels that they need in order to be able to have a job once they graduate from college. I learned a lot of information from Bill Daggett today that I hope that I'm able to take back, and that we're able to make a change here in our school district, that we're able to work together as teachers to help create a culture with our parents that look at the end result for our students and the vision that we have. I don't think that any of us want our students to not be able to find jobs upon graduating from college. Thank you.